Salutations, my dear viewers. This is your humble host, Quinsberry Lodge, and I'm sad to say that Games Workshop is now kowtowing to the liberal, social justice warriors, gender-bending fascists. You see, in the age of shitmask game, Warcry, that should really be known as SJW Cry, the leader of the Corvus Cabal is a woman. I can't believe Games Workshop thinks we, the fans, are that dumb to believe a woman is able to assume leadership in a killer gang of chaos worshippers. This goes against science, you see, as an average woman is weaker than an average man. Crazy leftist ideas has no place in our hobby.
There is forever now a part of me that lies there in the darkness, screaming as bloody sin brought bloody tide upon those streets of demons dreaming. From Theld of folk came Eld of death, a blade in velvet reckless hidden. 'Twas always way of Eld of life. What other death could we have bidden?
What happens when trading becomes more profitable than serf-based agriculture? What happens when land becomes a commodity rather than a title granted by a monarch? What happens when the rich are becoming richer and more powerful, while the poor are dying in the streets? Well, the poor are getting together and start sharpening the blades of the revolution. Of all little pieces of Warhammer lore, there is one short entry from the Shades of the Empire supplement that caught my eye. It is a relatively short article on the glorious revolution of the people reformed. As usual, let's first discuss the lore, and then we'll move into the real-life inspiration behind the lore and the ways you could use it in your RPG games. 10 years ago, a series of murders struck the streets of the poor neighborhoods of the Great City of Altdorf. The taverns were full of people sharing rumors about the gruesome murders. The guard didn't do much to investigate these crimes, while the poor were frightened to walk outside during the dark hours. It took a Kislevite poet, known by the name Prince Klozowski, to say what was on the minds of the people. Those were young rich nobles of the city, chasing down the poor for sport. His poem about the events, Ashes of Shame, was read in every tavern of the city. The rich were accusing Klozowski of rabble-rousing, while the poor were getting angry. Angry not at a criminal or specific enemy for the first time, but at the guard for the impotence, at the nobility for the moral degeneracy, and the monarchy for defending this unjust hierarchy at Sigmar's will. People became angry at the system itself for the first time. The calls for the revolution have set Altdorf on fire. With no leaders, no direction, and no plan, mob filled the streets. Very quickly, the uncontrollable violence lost focus and started to be directed everywhere, turning a revolution into another riot. That riot was suppressed in a single day. The ringleaders and most prominent agitators were executed, while the prince himself fled to Telia and was never caught. But you can never kill a true revolutionary while his heart is still beating. After 10 years of exile and devastation, Prince Klozowski is back, now armed with a better understanding of the struggle. Now he knows that it is not a matter of a swift cutting of the head of the Griffon, but a war where the hearts and minds of the people is the battlefield. This became a foundational idea of the GRPR, Glorious Revolution of the People Reformed. GRP chose the middle classes as their revolutionary subject, or speaking in marketing terms, core demographic. And they chose to avoid preaching as their way to promote revolution. They chose satire. Klozowski founded a newspaper called Griffon's Tale, and it became an overnight success. Today, it is a home of dozens of satirical writers and playwrights, some attracted by the revolutionary fervor, some by fame of being associated with the hottest pamphlet. The name Griffon's Tale itself is a symbolic joke. On the original logo at the top of the paper, that I wish I could reproduce, was an image of a backside of a griffin, the symbol of the imperial might, waving its tail above a pile of its own crap, with two peasants shuffling it. This image was too busy for mass printing, so the current logo is a simple tail of a griffin. Today, Tale is not a single newspaper, but a franchise, if you will. There are 3 tales operating in the city of Altdorf: the original Griffon's Tale, the Tale of the University operating in the north of the city, and Tale of the Gods operating at the Temple District. Klosowski to this day writes in almost every single issue of Griffon's Tale, usually under the moniker Tale Puller. GRP is a secret organization of writers, artists, reporters, jesters, printers, merchants, runners, messengers, delivery boys, demagogues, bodyguards and thieves. It is not illegal to print and sell newspapers, but it is illegal to undermine the social order and instigate a rebellion, so these people are always walking a legal tightrope. It is safer to keep a low profile around the guard. The fame of the tale has traveled all across the empire, and there are rumors that soon Nuln, Middenheim and Talabecland will have their own tales and tale pullers. And now let's talk about some real-life inspiration behind this lore. I think it is obvious to see that this organization is basically based on the Jacobin parties. The real-life Jacobins were people behind the Great French Revolution and the First Republic. Their aims were destruction of monarchy and establishment of a democratic constitutional society. The parallels here are obvious. GRP's final goal is revolution that shall overthrow the nobility and the monarchy, destroy the throne of the emperor, and establish a democratic state. Another big influence that I found surprising to see in Warhammer Fantasy are the British Trotskyist communist parties. At first it might sound funny, but there is a lot of similarities between them, if you would believe me. You see, Trotskyist parties are very often structured around newspaper production and distribution. There is a joke in political circles that the Trotskyists are always selling their newspapers, and so does the GRPR. The Trotskyists use those newspapers to agitate to the people, as well as to get funding for their campaigns. And again, most of the money that GRP gets comes from the sales of the tale. And there is one small little joke that they hid in the plain sight, and it is the name of the organization: Glorious Revolution of the People, Reformed. Those little words in brackets is a very obvious reference to the British Communist parties that used to split over minor political disagreements and get those little words in brackets all the time. Okay, so let's check this out. What the hell is going on right there? So, the CPGB PCC, not to be confused with the former Communist Party of Great Britain, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and the current Yeah, so you get me, you get what's happening, right? You get what's happening in formation. The origins lie in the new Communist Party of Britain NPC, which split from the Communist Party of Great Britain CPGB in 1977 under the name of... Yeah, so it's a thing. This one. Oh my god, this one. The Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain Marxist-Leninist, RCPBML. Previously named the Communist Party of England, CPEML. I must say, it's not really just Trotskyists. As you see from the names, it's everyone, really. It's everyone. I like this one. I like this name. It's simple, it's easy. Stalin Society. Nothing, just like Stalin Society. Easy to remember. SS, very nice acronym. I love the fact that they just assume you're going to confuse the Communist Party of Great Britain Marxist-Leninist with the Communist Party of Great Britain, Communist Party of Britain Marxist-Leninist, or Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain Marxist-Leninist. Those are 4 completely separate organizations from completely separate even times. Sometimes those parties coexist. By the way, let's take a look at the current communist parties. Specifically, I'm interested in the Marxist-Leninists because they look like the biggest offenders in terms of giant names. Communist Party of Great Britain Marxist-Leninist, Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain Marxist-Leninist, Communist Party of Britain Marxist-Leninist. Those are the current ones, I must say. Those are like coexisting names. New Communist Party of Britain, Communist Party of Britain, Communist Party of Great Britain Provisional Central Committee, Communist League is again trots. They tend to somehow have shorter names, which is nice. I must say those are notable minor parties, so there might be parties that have exactly the same name, but they're smaller and not as notable, so they're not just listed here. Socialist Equality Party, Socialist Workers' Party, Socialist Party England and Wales, Socialist Party of Great Britain. Those guys, I must say, very dumb on Twitter. Just a note, avoid those people. They're usually very dumb. They like to tweet at like check marks. Trade Unionist Socialist Coalition, Scottish Socialist Party Scotland. Those are separate ones. Irish Republic Socialist Party Ireland. Again, completely different parties. These are trots. Those ones are left-wing nationalists and Marxist-Leninists. And I'm not going to get into the rich history of British politics by going into this section. We have already looked at some of those parties, so let's just ignore that. And please note, I'm not making fun of any of them. You know, it's not about politics. Again, politics is my hobby, you know. But what is funny to me is the names themselves. I believe the naming has been, you know, not the strongest suit of many radical leftists since the Jacobins, really. Like, well, since Marx and his Communist League. He had the Communist League, and that's it, you know. Very easy. But since then, not the best names. And so if we sum up all of those influences, we get a populist, radical left-wing, revolutionary organization with a lot of potential for adventuring. So let's discuss how exactly can we use that in our tabletop games. Well, first of all, simply enough, you can roleplay as revolutionaries in Warhammer, which is always fun. Your players can be members of the organization and have different positions within it. I see this sort of adventure taking place on a citywide level. Your players would be fighting against greedy merchants, organized crime, power-hungry nobles, a suspected chaos cult, or any other problem that is the talk of the town but is being ignored by the city officials. But the revolutionary does not only face external problems, they also face internal struggle as well. There are many different kinds of people being attracted by the ideas of the revolution. Political grifters, rich proto-capitalists that wish that the guilds didn't exist so that they would overexploit the workers, and maybe even the spies of the empire itself. Don't you think that Sigismund over there has been rather quiet on our weekly meetings? Do you think he's trying to sell us out to the god? Has he already done so? Or it is me, who is trying to create paranoia in the ranks of the revolutionaries. This sort of technique is called badjacking. It is one of the techniques used as part of the COINTELPRO, a partly still ongoing operation in the United States to disrupt revolutionary parties and organizations. So if you want to find inspiration for the enemies that revolutionary might be fighting, you don't need to look far. Just look up history of the CIA. And because it is the revolutionaries we're talking about here, the culmination of your campaign could be your players rising to the top of their organization and leading the revolt in the streets. Will they succeed? Will they fail? And what if they take power? What happens the day after the revolutionary takeover? The other side of the whole thing is obviously the tale. We have been neglecting it for some time, and let's get to this part. The tale is an amazing thing that can spice up your game. Using newspapers in general is a great way to get some lore out there, get some adventure hooks out there, and get some interesting facts about the city that the players are going to face in the upcoming sessions. While your players and antagonists are fighting and plotting against each other, the writers of the tale are sharpening their pencils and writing the truth to the people. Are they correct? Are they wrong? Who knows? It's for you to decide. There is nothing cooler than actually writing a newspaper and giving it out to your players as a handout. I tried it and it was rather successful. The players were reading the newspaper aloud at the table, discussing the latest happenings in Altdorf. And here is the newspaper that I found. It is the first one that I ever did. It is not the tale, it is Altdorf the Gazette. The top story of the day. The mob lynched a mutant in the Little Moot. This is the 10th case of a mutant sighting in the last month. The guard is yet to comment on the issue. This article teased the actual adventure that we had later that session. The players were investigating those cases of mutants and discovering who's actually behind all of those mutations. Obviously it was Skaven.
Skaven have been busy using much warp stone.
If you want to use Tale as your newspaper, do note that these guys and girls became famous for not being another rumor tabloid. They would be given their own spin on the going-ons in the city, a more anti-authoritarian and critical. But feel free to come up with your own newspaper, or use any other newspaper that was also mentioned in the lore, like Altdorfer Spiegel or Altdorf Times or whatever. I'm specifically saying this because creating a special flavor enhances your game. As I mentioned before, use lore to your advantage, rather than be used by the lore. Using an NPC who is somehow associated with the tale or the GRP is a great way to introduce a political or an intellectual type character. It is also a great way to practice some buzzwords that the US founding fathers and the left Twitter uses. Tyranny, rights, ontological. So there we have it. The GRP, the revolutionaries of the Warhammer world. So, at the end of each video, I always provide a piece of the homebrew materials that I found on already non-existent websites or abandoned forums. And this time we have a special entry from Ancient History that was posted on the forums of RPG.com. Ancient History has converted a bunch of runes that can be used on gunpowder weapons, from the fantasy battles to roleplay 2nd edition. There are also some extra rituals for enchantments that could be used by wizards. A nice addition to the game that you're free to use, the link is in the description. But here's the kicker, Ancient History was banned from the forum, and there is a rather cryptic message left by one of the admins, Kurt, who's also banned. And I would just ignore it, but the phrasing is extremely specific. There is some sort of history hidden there that we will never uncover, and all we have is a short comment by the banned admin.
Banned means banned. Ancient history. Permanently, in your case. Understand that we will always catch you out, should you choose to post under a sock puppet account, and that your threads will always be either locked or deleted. Your ideas will not be discussed, your passions will not be indulged, your presence will not be suffered. To put it simply, you're banned, no longer welcome. In 5 minutes, I shall also permaban your third sock puppet, but I wanted you to get a chance to see this first. Thank you and good evening, Kurt.
The original post is linked in the description. I also include this thing. Now this is the Griffon's Tale. It is a rather short pamphlet written by Prince Klosowski himself that I used for my latest campaign that we started yesterday. You can notice the symbol there. It is one of the symbols that the organization uses. It is an eye of Shyla that is crying a tear that is becoming a flame. This newspaper sets up my version of the lore, which is a non-canon Storm of Chaos version of it. I also introduced some changes. You will find an interesting reference there, a reference to the workhouses. There are no workhouses in Warhammer Fantasy, but I thought that it is a very interesting piece of real-life history that would be fun to include there. If you didn't know, workhouses were first examples of charity organizations that were set up in Victorian England. It might sound fine, but those were rather hellish organizations. In the description you will find a great video by Angie Speaks that goes into the history behind those workhouses. In real life, those were religious institutions, and so it is in my version of Warhammer. They are run by the cult of Sigma, and most of the people that work there are migrants that ran away from the Archaeon's invasion. And let's just say, Altdorfers don't really like those workhouses that much. The Sigmarite cult found a loophole that allows them to produce and sell goods to the army without abiding by the guild laws. The Sigmarite cult is getting richer, and the guilds are very pissed about that. Have you ever used any newspapers or the Tale specifically? Have you ever used any revolutionaries in your games? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I would like to thank Vosh for providing his voice for this video, as well as other people who contributed to this video happening. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel, this helps out a lot, and see you in the next one. This was the article that teased the actual adventure that we had.